Hello, Black Eagles. Welcome back to the Black Eagles podcast. As always, we do our previews for our European opponents. And of course, we are facing Shakhtar Donetsk on Thursday, the 24th of July. And then the return will be on the 31st of July the following week. And joining me today is a special guest and expert on Ukrainian football, Andrew Todos. Andrew, thank you very much for joining me on the show.
Hey, pleasure to once again be chatting about Ukrainian side facing Besiktas. This one should be interesting. The last time round, I think Besiktas ended up being the winners in that against Dynamo, but poor Dynamo side, and obviously lots of developments. And now even Shakhtar is quite close to Turkish football with its new manager. So plenty to discuss, and I think this tie has got lots of different dimensions to it as a result.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, last time we spoke, as you said, 2 years ago, things are a little bit different now. We've upgraded our look a little bit with video and stuff like that now. So the first time that people will be able to see you live on camera. So thanks for being a recurring guest, of course, Andrew, and thank you for giving us your insights today on Shakhtar Donetsk. How would you say today's Shakhtar, because they are coming off of a not impressive season, especially for Shakhtar standards, how would you say today's Shakhtar compares to, for example, that Dynamo Kyiv side from 2 years ago, who you said were quite poor?
Well, if we're going to summarize their last season, I think it's fair to say that I think it's their worst domestic campaign since like 1995-96, which I think is the last time they didn't finish in the top two of Ukraine. And as a result of that, Marino Pusic, the Dutch/Bosnian Croat manager, was let go. And as a result of that, Arda Turan has now been brought in, and he's the new head coach there. Evidently, I think it's still very early doors, regardless of the fact that Shakhtar started the Europa League qualifying campaign in round one, where they won quite comfortably, which I'm sure we'll discuss in a minute. I think it's still very early doors to understand what Arda Turan is going to bring in, how he's going to work with the team. Because as to date, as of recording, Shakhtar have only brought in one incoming signing this summer transfer window. And that's Marlon, a centre-back, actually used to play for them in the 21-22 season.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's made his debut yet in terms of, he's not going to be of some massive calibre of signing to be like, oh wow, this is sort of made a big difference. So far it's very much everything that Shakhtar had last season. They signed a few Brazilians for quite big money in the winter who didn't really adapt particularly quickly before the end of their campaign. And now it seems, at least from the early let's say qualifying first round, that potentially they may be having their breakthrough campaign this time round. So we'll have to wait and see. But I think there is some kind of more positive outlook for Shakhtar this campaign. Not only because like they were so bad last year, and just the need for improvement, and I think the pressures that come with it.
Yeah. Sounds to an extent similar to Beşiktaş. We are in a similar situation where really the club is going through a rebuilding phase where, if you remember, 2 years ago when they played Dynamo Kyiv, a lot of the transfer politics of the club have been really poor in the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years. And really the club is still feeling the lasting impact of that, where right now they're in a situation where, in an ideal world, you'd probably bring in 15 new players. But of course, that's not possible. And really, like I told you off air, there's quite a bit of anxiety because, of course, Shakhtar, regardless of the campaign they had last season domestically, I didn't really pay particular attention how they did in Europe last season, but it's still a big name in European football, especially the last 20 years. It's a team that has, in fact, never lost. I don't even think they've ever dropped points against a Turkish opponent in Europe. So it's a very intimidating draw, especially for the fans. They're very anxious about it because, as you said, Beşiktaş have brought in some big names with Tammy Abraham and with Orkun Kökçü. But this team needs a lot more. And it's also questionable whether both Tammy and Orkun will be ready for this game to begin with. Tammy will probably start. Orkun probably will start on the bench. So really, for the most part, it's still very much the same team as last season. The only big difference is going to be David Jurasek on left back instead of Artur Masuaku. So for Beşiktaş, they're coming off of a not great campaign themselves. Finished in 4th place. Okay European campaign with a lot of ups and downs. Some big results mixed with some really disappointing results in Europe. But they're coming coming from a place where the team is really struggling or coming off of 2 bad domestic campaigns. There's a lot of transformation required. The fans are expecting a lot more. And yeah, there's just a lot of anxiety because of that. Also, Arda Turan, of course, being a factor. He knows Turkish football very well, so that's an advantage for Shakhtar, I think. So yeah, 2 teams that perhaps are on the forefront of a season where they don't really know fully what to expect yet, sounds like to me, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that your listeners probably know more what to expect from Arda Turan as a coach than I do, purely from seeing his Eyüpspor in the Super League last season. Mm-hmm. Whereas we've only seen 2 competitive matches, one where they won extremely comfortably against an Ilves side from Finland, who were really low level opponents. And then the second leg, he made 8 changes to the starting lineup and they drew 0-0, evidently knowing that there's not much incentive to sort of overexert yourself with the much bigger fixtures coming up in the coming weeks against Beşiktaş. So I think at the moment, early sort of signs have been like Shakhtar have had 4 friendlies as well in between those 2 matches. So they've had a bit of a pre-season. In a sense, they should be, let's say, maybe a bit more match fit than Beşiktaş are, purely based on where both are in their stages of the season. But most of those friendlies, as you can expect, have been lots of rotation. Some of them have come directly the day after those first round Europa League qualifying games. So it's like the other 11 that didn't feature. Yeah. It's just, to give a run around and that kind of thing. But I think the general thing that we've seen so far is that Arda Turan is trying to at least up the intensity of this Shakhtar side because of the war in Ukraine. The past few years, there's been a kind of a decline in the sort of intensivity of not just Shakhtar, but Dynamo Kyiv and any other teams that are playing in Europe. Yeah. Because of against the kind of opposition they play against. And I mean, even before the war, when you play against like 10 men behind the ball kind of thing every week at home, and then, you travel away and all that kind of thing for Europe, it's difficult to then keep that up against sides that maybe have more intensity every single week. So I think it was quite a big shock in the first sort of couple of weeks of pre-season where Arda Turan was doing like 3 sessions a day, lots of running, everyone feeling sick, that kind of thing. But against Ilves, which is not a litmus test or any sort of blueprint of any kind of comparison compared to Beşiktaş, they did look quite good in that first leg, especially the Brazilians that I mentioned that didn't, hit the ground running particularly well last campaign. They seem to have now befriended one another, and we're sort of seeing a return to the kind of Shakhtar that we saw prior to 2022 when the full-scale invasion began, where there is a lot of Brazilian talent. I would even say closer to sort of the early 2010s in terms of the structure of the squad. Defensively, predominantly Ukrainians, and then we've got a couple in midfield, and then the rest are like the main attack force is Brazilian in core. They signed a guy called Alisson in the January transfer window for about I don't know, around 15 million euros, something around that, push below or above. But he got 2 goals in that first leg, and I think 3 assists. So he seems to have maybe got into the groove of that. The centre forward they signed for a similar amount of money from Brazil as well, Kaan Elias, has not been as impressive, I think, as many people had hoped for that kind of money thus far. He's a lot better. I mean, he's still got some adaptation to do. He's still very young, but he also got a goal in that first game. So, I mean, very little to go off. And I think that realistically, as you mentioned, for both of our sides, this is where we'll see whether they're ready for the season or not. This is going to be the first real test, realistically, to understand where they're going to go going forward. And I mean, evidently with the Trans Galatasaray links and all that kind of thing, I think this game's going to be very interesting from an atmosphere-wise, especially the game in Istanbul.
Yeah, and that's, of course, do you see that as an advantage for Shakhtar that they get to go away first? Or do you think that given the circumstances of with the war in Ukraine, of course, and the return leg being played, I believe in Slovenia, right? Or is it Slovakia?
No, it's in Poland now.
Oh, okay.
So it's in Krakow.
Okay, so it's being
Krakow.
Yeah. So there's going to be a decent amount of Ukrainian fans there, I expect. But it's still not the same, of course, as playing in your own stadium. So how do you see that exactly?
Well, I think it's actually kind of an advantage right now to be playing Besiktas, for example, than when the domestic season starts. Because once the domestic season starts, they've got to go to Ukraine, and then they've got to travel over the border by a bus, and that takes hours. And, you know, the kind of preparation, the stiffness in legs and all that kind of thing, and even just general fatigue. Once you're like into match day 4 or 5 of European competition, then it gets quite difficult. Whereas right now it's the summer, they're having their pre-season camp, as you mentioned, in Slovenia. They played their first home match against Ilves in Slovenia, and now they're going to play the remainder of their European matches at home, in inverted commas, in Krakow.
Yeah, and of course,
I just think that will be fine for them from a perspective, because they played in Germany the past 2 seasons. From Europe, and I think it went okay, but now because it's in the Europa League, the ability to draw big crowds in Germany, I think slightly more limited than if they were in the Champions League, for example. So they've gone for something that I think a bit more manageable, and we'll see what kind of crowds they actually do attract when it comes to Krakow.
Yeah, of course, football can be a distraction, but a lot of Ukrainian people fled to Poland and are currently residing in Poland. So perhaps that's going to be an advantage for them playing in Poland. Easier access maybe for those people. But yeah, it's hard to predict.
Definitely both ways. I mean, it's going to be less travel from once the actual full European season starts, if they make it that far. Be it either in this competition or the Conference League. And similarly, Krakow has got loads of Ukrainians, and there's loads of Ukrainians in nearby towns and cities. So I think that there will be an interest, but it always depends on sort of the draw. But I mean, with Arda Turan coming in, sort of a new look Shakhtar, that kind of thing, you know, under his helm, Besiktas coming in, who are quite a good draw as well. I'm sure that some fans will travel as well, so they'll make an atmosphere of their own. They will be quite an interesting tie in general once the second leg actually gets underway. But obviously it won't be anything compared to probably the kind of hellish atmosphere that you guys will create in the first leg.
Hopefully the ticket prices were announced yesterday, and they're quite steep, so I'm not sure. I hope, of course, it's going to be a full stadium, but that's also been part of the issues in recent years, because the Turkish economy isn't great, and the ticket prices are crazy. Like I think the cheapest tickets are like €100 or something like that. So that's
bloody hell.
Yeah, it's really crazy. It's really insane. It's really insane. And that's been a big part of the issue as well in recent years. Just like, you know, if you have a good team, then people don't mind paying a little bit more. But if you're watching a team that's finishing 40 something points off the top and playing the type of football that isn't exactly the most appealing, then yeah, it's hard to fill the stadium out. So it's going to be interesting to see. I didn't look at it in very much detail, so I might be off with the 100% price mark there, 100 euro price mark there. But I did see reactions that the prices are very high again. So even for European standards, because I think if you go to a Champions League game most of the time, like I think they could start around 30-35 euros. So yeah, that's pretty steep for sure. You already talked a little bit about the new influx of Brazilian talent, and of course Shakhtar have a long-standing tradition of Brazilian talent, but also domestic talent. Are there some players that you would like to highlight as players that Beşiktaş should watch out for and are going to be dangerous for the team, or just key players at the back or in goal? Anyone that you can mention?
Yeah, well, obviously I mentioned a couple of Brazilians there. I think Alisson is probably going to be the standout player from the attack for the time being. Kevin on the other wing is also pretty good. He has really come to his own over the past sort of year, past 6 months or so, and he's become a real sort of leader in the team, from just like being able to take the game by scruff of its neck and sort of score or assist and that kind of thing. And he's already being linked with sort of Syria and all that kind of stuff. But Shakhtar want ridiculous money, so we'll see if anyone is going to pay or being ready to pay for that anytime soon. There is obviously the sort of main Ukrainian asset in the team, which is Georgi Sudakov, the attacking midfielder, Ukraine national team man. He's been sort of tipped to be the next sort of big Ukrainian transfer out of the UPL for like the past couple of seasons now, but Shakhtar do want quite a lot of money for him, and I think it was initially like 50 million euros. Maybe they might be ready to let him go for 40 million euros now, but there hasn't been sort of a huge amount of progression from him over the past maybe year at a minimum. That being said, it's quite difficult maybe to do that in, Ukrainian Premier League, which is not at its strongest.
Yeah.
And similarly, when Shakhtar are, struggling against quite big European sides in the Champions League, as they have done over the past few seasons, he's not really been able to show his best. But this is another option. It's another season in the Europa League. These are the kinds of matches where he is in the window. So if he wants to get that move, he has to show something. So we're hoping that he will be able to. But based on how that first leg went against Ilves, it was quite interesting to see that he wasn't as involved because the Brazilians have sort of got their own chemistry, sort of passing between themselves and that kind of thing. And, he wasn't as included as he usually is. And then he was subbed off on around 60 minutes, just for rotation purposes because it was the first game of pre-season. But you could expect, you'd hope that there'd be maybe more from him. And that's what I'm hoping for in these two matches, that he will be able to show himself in that regard. And I mean, then alongside him, which we'll most likely see, I'm not 100% sure, but we're going off sort of the first qualifying round, first leg, starting lineup, Artem Bondarenko. He's been linked with Trabzonspor over the past sort of 6 months or so. I don't think there's any realistic chances they'd be able to sign him really for anything under 10 million, and that would break their transfer record and all that kind of thing. So, he's
the Turkish clubs are breaking the bank lately, so
yeah. Well, so he is one that similarly I think has to show a bit more to sort of fulfill what many people had expectations of him maybe a couple of years ago, where he was an up and coming central midfielder. He's quite tall, a bit spindly, but he's got quite good ball control, good dribbling, that kind of thing. He also needs to push on, and these are another two big games where he can and should hopefully be able to at least showcase sort of the best of his abilities, but we will see. And then I think one more person that I probably would highlight from a maybe Ukrainian perspective, there's Marlon Gomez, the Brazilian, who's now sort of taken up a more holding role in midfield, and he was sort of starting a lot of the attacks and the transitions in that first leg, linking up with his other Brazilians. But I think another key player, especially probably Shakhtar's player of the year last year, in my opinion, is Dmitro Riznik in the goal. He had a really big showing in the Champions League last year, like really big saves, and sort of sometimes, result dependent if maybe the players in front of him were a bit more proficient. He's going to be key if he can pull off a few big saves, especially if, he's going to be coming up against the likes of Abraham. He will be, integral to ensuring that Shakhtar has got something to go back to in the second leg. So there is lots of talent in this team. It's just whether it can, in reality, because like I've said, Arda Turan's worked with them, for the best part of 3-4 weeks now. He's trying to pick that intensity up. Let's see if that conditioning has worked. Mm-hmm. Will his team be able to, maybe outrun Beşiktaş over these two matches? I don't know whether they will or not, but especially just in the current stage that both clubs are at, I think maybe Shakhtar about a week or two maybe ahead of where Beşiktaş are, just purely based on those first competitive matches where, as we all know, friendlies, players, opponents, there's no guarantee who's taking it seriously or not, who's playing at 100% or not. In these matches, they have to give it 100%. So that's something that I think will be pretty interesting to take note of and watch.
Yeah, it's for Shakhtar the first big test, but for us it's not just the first big test, but also the first matches of importance, as you say. And friendlies are always difficult. Our fans tend to go a little bit rabid over friendlies and the results in friendlies, but you play one team 45 minutes, you play the other another lineup the next 45 minutes. It's really a glorified training session to try new things, to give players match fitness, as you say. So really, you can't really tell too much from friendly matches. In the past, when we've won our league titles, we usually had like really bad friendlies in preseason in terms of results, of course, but it's not about results in those friendlies. But then the question is going to be for us, are we going to be able to match Shakhtar's intensity? Like you said, they're a couple of weeks ahead. I was quite puzzled by the fact that we started our preseason on the 1st of July. I would have expected starting more in late June, maybe like around the 20th, maybe 25th of June. So you do have a difference there in terms of a week or so. Beşiktaş did hire a new physical coach, Johnny Northeast, who has worked for the club in the past, and I can say that in that season that he worked for us, that the team was physically very, very strong. Unfortunately, it lacked quality elsewhere. In fact, I think that might have been the season before the Dynamo Kyiv game. So I don't remember exactly, but it's going to be interesting to see how Beşiktaş match up physically, because they have a physical coach with a good reputation. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer seems to be convinced that the players are ready physically. But the big issue that Beşiktaş have had the last couple of seasons is that really their wings are quite weak. Beşiktaş don't really have a lot of good quality wingers. There's a young Ecuadorian kid, Kenny Arroyo. He's very talented, but he's still only 19 years old, so he still has to kind of find his footing. Then there's Milot Rasica, who's 27 years old, but he's not very good. It's very frustrating to watch. And then on the left side, Beşiktaş don't really even have a true winger. There's players playing there that are really being played out of position. You have Ernest Muçu, who's more of an attacking midfielder. There's Semih Kılıçsoy, who's more a striker. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Ole Gunnar Solskjaer fixes that. And that's one of the big sources of frustrations for fans, that really one of the most glaring issues that Beşiktaş have had in the last couple of years are those wings, and that is a position that has not yet been addressed. I know it's early, and I personally think that you can't just build your transfer policy around this game because it's so early in the season. And really, you have to be a little bit more patient with how you spend your money. I think you need to be smart about it. You can't just rush things just for this one fixture. But it is going to be a big disadvantage for Beşiktaş. I think that they don't have proper wing play, especially up front. They do have a good attacking wing back now with Jurasek. Svensson is usually reliably defensively, but that's their biggest weakness. What would you say Shakhtar's biggest weakness are coming out of last season? What really was the issue for them last season? Do you see there's a certain area of the pitch that's lacking quality right now?
Well, I think that the centre forward, like I mentioned, Kaan Elias, big money, still not, I think, fully, at peak confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So there is going to be a reliance on Shakhtar's wings to actually provide a lot, create a lot, maybe even score compared to him, because he gets a lot of chances, but he just can't finish for whatever reason. Let's see if that changes in these next two matches, but there's a possibility of that. I would have said maybe the intensity and the physicality from last season, it was something that definitely was a problem, especially in the sort of later stages of matches. Shakhtar sort of ended up fading.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're such an early stage of the season, I don't think that should be too much of a problem. No travel extensively, as I've said, because they've been training in Slovenia, other than obviously just flying to Istanbul and back. And then you've got, I would say maybe defensively, there are a few times that partnership of Matvienko and Bondar, there have been mistakes. There's a bit of complacency sometimes. There's certainly better centre-backs out there. But on their day, they can be a lot better. It's just that whether it's going to be on that day or not, that's the question. So I think, it's that at the back end and at the front end of the pitch where Shakhtar possibly could do with a few of improvements. And I mean, if Marlon, the new signing, is going to be featuring at all, if he gets a start or anything like that, then that would be even more interesting, because I wasn't fully convinced of him during his first stint at Shakhtar, but somehow he's then ended up going on to play for like Monza. He's gone to play for LAFC, and he's seemingly, been taken to like various different clubs and leagues where he's been semi-okay. But I still, if he was to start, for example, I think it might be a bit of a problem, because I wasn't fully convinced of his first time round when Roberto De Zerbi was in charge, and there seemed to be a slight lack of coherence. And I mean, especially as I mentioned, with the back line predominantly being Ukrainian, I feel that you probably want the continuity of the Ukrainian players at least there. And then, if you need to go and attack with the Brazilians, then fine. At least they've started building their chemistry enough to create things and look quite good in terms of like the combination play, passing, and that kind of thing up at the front of the pitch.
Okay, thanks Andrew for your time, and the main takeaways for me here are, as always, of course, that first match is going to be key. It's the home game for Beşiktaş, so they are really going to have to make the difference there, I think, and then hopefully get a good enough result so that the away game will maybe not be that important anymore. But against a side like Shakhtar, it's never going to be easy. It's probably going to be tight. Two teams that are coming off of disappointing seasons and are standing at the forefront of maybe a good season, maybe not. We'll have to wait and see. Lots of question marks on both ends, I get the impression. But I definitely think Shakhtar are probably a little bit more ready right now, because Beşiktaş are just a big question mark at the moment. Thanks for your time, and of course, again, for joining us I think this is like the third time you've been on the show, because I think we talked to you about Alex Teixeira in the past as well. So thanks for being a recurring guest, Andrew. I appreciate it a lot.
Thanks for having me, and everyone enjoy the game on the upcoming Thursday and the week after as well.
Yeah. So on Thursday at 8 Central European time, the match will be played at the Beşiktaş Stadium, and then the return, of course, a week later in Krakow at the same time 8 Central European time, so that's 9 local in Turkey. Thank you all for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you can be notified of any future videos and live streams. And thank you all for following our podcast. Bye bye.